Okay, good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. All right, I am just going to get started. So thank you, everyone, for joining me on this presentation on video gait analysis for prosthetics and orthotics. If you've seen me present before, I've been presenting on this topic for a few years, mostly because I've really found it to be an important part of my practice and an important part of how I communicate with my referral sources, with my patients, and with the entire healthcare team that I work with. So we at Gainesville Prosthetics have quite a bit of space that we can dedicate to our video analysis. So if you have not seen any of my previous presentations, I have some links and some resources available for best practices for setting up video, what kind of space you might need. So today's presentation is going to be more interactive than you might be ready for. So I want you to open your chat so that you make sure that you're participating in today's presentation. So I'm going to be going over a method that I use, and I'm going to have the entire audience give me their feedback on what they think that they see so that we could score this person's gait together. So let's see here. How do you quantify the quality of gait? I know that when I was in school, I was taught, the 6 determinants of gait, and I was told to go through, what's going on at the ankle, what's going on at the knee, and what's going on at the hip, and then maybe the trunk. But I didn't really have a method for this. And my passion for video and my sort of having that light bulb moment of seeing the value of video started when I was working in Australia, and I had a patient who wanted to pay cash for a microprocessor product. So I wanted to be able to take as much evidence in and give him actual objective data that I could, besides, we think we see that you walk better, or you've been able to reduce some of these gait deviations. I wanted an actual measurement. I'm an engineer, so if I can have numbers, I want numbers. I want to have my subjective opinion, of course, but I also want to be able to give people some type of objective data and evidence. So I started to research, what scores and what video processes and other things that were out there. And I started to use a program that was made for athletic coaching. I'm going to show you about this program today, but I want you guys to consider that you can download the score, and you can get the original study, and you could just use your video on your phone to start to quantify gait. You don't have to have any fancy equipment, and that's really the great thing of these smartphones and how fast they've progressed, that we can actually all take pretty good video with what's in our pocket. So I use the POGS and the EVGS, so the Prosthetic Observational Gait Score and the Edinburgh Visual Gait Score. The reason that I use these is because they were designed to be used with video. And for that reason, in our clinic, we can take the video and then we can score it later. We don't have to take the time up with the patient that's in the room. We can actually just go back and score the video after, which is what I would recommend, number one. And number two, it saves the patient a lot of time. In our initial evaluation, we're going through a lot of outcome measures in our clinic. So the amputee mobility predictor can take some time. We'll do a 2-minute walk test. Typically, we'll do a tug. We'll also do our activities specific balance confidence. So these are like 2-hour appointments when a new patient is coming to us. Let's say they have a prosthesis, and that's what we're going to be going over today. We have a patient that came to us, had a prosthesis already, but he was actually going through a lot of falls. He was experiencing a lot of falls, and I wanted to act quickly, and I wanted to work with his doctor very quickly so that we could reduce his falls as quickly as we possibly could. So, so you'll see that this patient, I just took the video during our initial evaluation, and then I went through and I scored it afterwards, which we'll be going through today. The reason that I use the prosthetic observational gait score and the Edinburgh visual gait score is that they are sensitive enough to detect changes following an intervention. So this study was actually done with surgery patients, but they say that if you can see a difference of 3, then you've done a clinical change. You can say that that's a clinical change. So I like that because there are 17 different measures that we're going to go over, but that's where you get that sensitivity too. The more you measure, the more that you're going to be able to see a change. So so it might seem like it's a lot of things to look at, but if you're looking to actually see a change, then you do have to look at the 17 different measures. And also, inexperienced observers were reasonably reliable and ranked scores similarly than their experienced counterparts. Now, this is important for me because we're part of the Baylor residency program, and our residents are wonderful, and they are able to jump in and do these scores, and we often compare. So the resident will do a score and I'll do a score, and we'll compare and see, and then we'll discuss it and we'll debate and we'll say, okay, well, let's come to a conclusion maybe and say that, you know, maybe we didn't see vaulting. Let's remove that one. So it's a really great way to engage residents or inexperienced observers. You know, 20 years of experience of observational gait analysis is one thing, but if you don't have that experience, these scores can really help guide you in a way to be able to have a method and a systematic approach to it. So we'll go over the score. I'll show you what I'm going to show you later, but I just want to throw out there a couple of other things to consider while we're going through the use of video and how you could use these scores. They give you that method of quantifying your intervention, a systematic process that ensures that there's consistency. So again, consistency, sorry, my dog is in the room, consistency between me as an experienced observer and between my resident who is less experienced but still is doing a great job at being able to use these scores. We identify patients with mobility risk very quickly, and again, we can jump on that and work with their doctor to really show the doctor what we're seeing in the videos. We can measure the effectiveness of our therapies and the rehabilitation rate. So what that means is that we're going to measure in our initial evaluation, and then after we have intervened and we've provided a new prosthesis, a new socket, we can actually then measure again and see if we've done a good job. I do recommend following the best practices for setting up video. If you haven't read the study by Fatoni and Stein, that is a great study that basically gives you the best practices for how 2D video can be comparable to 3D video or 3D gait analysis. So I do recommend reading that study. And also it's a method for you to participate in research. So our clinic is participating in research by taking our videos and scoring them and also comparing them to TUG scores and other measures that we're looking at. So we're using it as a part of our outcome measures protocol so that we can show our community, our referral sources, how we are serving their patient population. So, all right. So really quickly here, if you have your phone and by the way, if you want, quickly put these into your phone so that you can have them for later. But I also have a resources folder that is that I'll share at the end that basically will give you the all of the resources that you might need for today, including this presentation. So you'll have all of these links here. And here are my references, but we're not done yet. We're only 9 minutes in. So let's go to, so here's my resources folder that I'll share with everybody. I'll make sure everybody has this link, and here's the presentation and some other tutorials. And also, if you are looking for more videos, if you go to YouTube and go to Piano Data Solutions, there's a getting started presentation using apps, using a gait score. But again, All of these methods that I'm going to show you today do not require you to have the software. You can do it by hand. I'm just going to show you the way that I do it. So let's go over here. So, and also anybody can register for P&O data and take some of these video gait analysis courses here as well. The 2D video gait analysis course is also available for ABC credits. So today, we are going to start a new P&O data gait score. So I come here to the wizard. And I'm going to pick sagittal and coronal videos, and I'll just create a new report. Okay, so the way that this software works is that it's going to, and this is a web-based software, it's going to lead you through the process. But like I said, you can go and print off the original study, and you can then be able to score it yourself just using the video that you've captured on your phone. So I'm going to skip some of this for the time being. Okay, so I'm going to look for my videos here. So these videos, we actually, we used to take video in the patient room, but because we're not allowing too many people in our waiting room, we actually brought the video out into the lobby so that we could get more steps. And that gives us a little bit more information to use. And then we're taking the videos at the same time as well. So we've got our sagittal and then our coronal videos. Okay, so when I am using the score, I always open up the explanatory notes. So these are the explanatory notes from the original study for the POGs. And like I said, the Edinburgh Visual Gait Score is actually was developed first, and it was developed, and then everybody realized, okay, well, we need to take a couple of measures out for prosthetic observational gait scores. And so we now use the POGs as for our prosthetics patients and the Edinburgh for any orthotic patients. It's validated for cerebral palsy, the EBGS is, and I've seen that the work has been done for validation with stroke, but I have not seen it published yet. I just saw it as a presentation once. So Rachel, I will go back to the QR slides at the end. Okay. So I want to quickly cover what the Edinburgh and the POGs are and what they're doing. So the researchers decided on 17 different measures that they want to observe during gait. And you're going to score a 0 for someone who falls within normal limits. What they did is there's certain measures that you're actually going to measure, let's say a thigh angle or a knee flexion angle. And those are going to be, if they're outside of one standard deviation, then you're going to score a 1. And if they're outside of 2 standard deviations from what would be considered normal, then it would be a score of 2. So the notes kind of lead you through that process of what you're looking at for each of these scores and why you would score something different. And then also some possible causes. So I like to have these open because if I think that the patient is experiencing one of these possible causes, I can just really quick copy and paste that and put it into my notes section so that I have a good record of what I observed. So the first thing we're going to look at is our, and I'll put the video bigger so you can all see. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is arm swing. And The explanatory notes say that the arm should swing symmetrically with an amplitude appropriate to the walking speed. You're going to score a 1 for asymmetrical arm swing. And then a score of 2 would be absent or negligible, even when this is due to use of walking aids. So that's a really important thing to note, by the way. So I am going to, oh, I didn't see your question, Rachel, but I'm glad I already answered it. So we're going to watch this patient here. And this is going to pull up the part of the score that I'm interested in. So I always like to watch them walk one way and then walk the other way as well. So as you see, definitely on that prosthetic side, he really does not have a lot of arm swing. And then of course he doesn't have as much arm swing on the contralateral side because he is using a cane. So I want everybody to put in the chat box, based on our explanatory notes and what you just read and saw, what would you score this? Would you score this a 1 with the asymmetrical contralateral is greater than the ipsilateral? Or would you score it a 0, normal and symmetric, or a 1, symmetrical, again, if the ipsilateral is greater than the contralateral, or absent or negligible? Yeah, so I do think, Jerry, that it would have a difference between what, where they're putting their walking aid. And that's why I actually also moved people out of the parallel bars, because I found that when parallel bars are there, they are exhibiting a completely different gait than what they would be if they were walking in the community, for instance. So that's why I do like to have the extra space of our lobby now, so that we can really see, how they walk. I'm often the clinician. I have a window that looks out at the parking lot, and I'm very well known for watching people walk out and watching people walk in, because I get a real good idea of what's really going on with them, outside of the patient care room. So, all right, I think we've only got 2 answers. So I'm going to go with what everybody says here, which would be a 2, which is the absent or negligible arm swing. And like I said, I could take this and knowing the patient, this is definitely a reason that he has said that he does not feel confident in his prosthesis. He's actually not even able to get all the way down into his prosthesis. So that's really a lot what's going on here. So let's just, what I typically will also try to do is find an image that means something to me for what's going on. And let's go back here. So typically you'll see someone's arm swing at the greatest amplitude when their contralateral leg is swinging forward. And so I'm not seeing, and you would actually see it, outside the frame of their body. So I don't need to use any fancy tools right now, by the way. So if I wanted to, I could point to it. When I'm teaching students and they come in and they see all these tools, these measurement tools that we could use, I actually tell people to just start off with, like, what observation do you want everybody to see? Don't worry about using anything fancy right away. Just point something out in a picture for me, or circle something that means something to you. And then I put that screenshot in there. So again, you could do this in Word, you could do this in PowerPoint, anything, you can use lots of different free tools if you want to get started using video. Okay, so now we're going to look for vaulting in stance. So in normal gait, the total vertical displacement of the head and trunk is around 2% of the body height. So about 35 millimeters for a person who's 6 foot tall. This patient is not 6 foot tall, but what we're looking for, and I think everybody's pretty familiar with vaulting, but a score of 1 is moderate. So the appearance of heel lift is negligible. a score of 2 would be marked. So if you see that really visible heel lift during mid stance. And then of course, we've got some possible causes of vaulting. Prosthesis could be too long. The prosthesis function is too long and swing. So if their socket is too small, which is definitely something that's going on with this patient. So we're going to then take a look and see what we see. So we'll go back a couple of frames here till he comes into the frame. So you can see, because now he's really got his, up here, I'll make it a little bit bigger. Sorry about that. And I like to use my my toggle arrows on my keyboard so that I can see. So you would typically see a heel rise right around here if he was going to have a heel rise. So we can see there that he doesn't really have a heel rise going on there. Okay, so put your answers in the chat for what you think as far as vaulting goes. Do you want to score it as visible heel lift and on the ipsilateral side, negligible on ipsilateral, normal, or also, you know, some patients you might even see on the, ipsilateral would be more rare than contralateral. So a 0 would be normal, 1 would be negligible, and 2 would be visible. So it doesn't really matter which one of these we pick. As far as the scoring goes. Remember, it's by standard deviation. So the higher the score, the more gait deviations the person has. This information is really just for us to say, okay, if they have vaulting on the ipsilateral side with a transtibial prosthesis, what would we be doing to remedy that? That might be a good assessment tool for you to decide how you're going to work with the patient's componentry, for instance. Okay, so we'll say normal, and I'll go back to this screenshot here. And again, something just very simple. I can just point and say no heel rise. And we'll just take a screenshot. All right. Okay, so the next measure is lateral trunk lean and side flexion. So the great thing about this is that now, as you see, it's pulled up the video that I'm looking to see. I'm going to just scrub through till he gets a little bit closer to the camera. All right. So we are looking at his lateral trunk lean, and the explanatory notes really go through everything that we're looking for. So we would score 1 for moderate. So if the displacement of the head is up to and in line with the supporting foot, or score 2 for a marked displacement, meaning that the displacement of the head is beyond the supporting foot. So I really like to keep these notes open while you're first starting to use these scores. Now, keep in mind, of course, as I'm explaining this is going to take me a lot longer than it would take me on a normal basis. But I would say that when I started with these scores, it would take me about 30 minutes to do one initially, but now I'm down to maybe like even 10 minutes. It really depends on how much assessment information I'm also putting into the notes. So if I'm just typically scoring it, then I can be a lot faster at it. But if I want to actually create a report that's going to be sent to a referring physician to really discuss and show him my assessment, then I'll take my time and I'll add more information. So let's take a look and see if we see his displacement of his head in line with the supporting foot or over it. So let's make that a little bit bigger for y'all to see. just go back a little bit and I'll let it run through all on its own for just one pass through. So if you can kind of see, you know, that socket is not fitting very well at all. He's not really in that socket. He's not getting any support around that pelvis area. So his gait shows that too. He's not really even putting all of his weight on the prosthesis. In fact, if anything, we might score this as something that that he's keeping his weight all on the contralateral side. So we could either choose that he is marked to the swing side or moderate to the swing side, or normal or moderate to stance side, or marked to stance side. So beyond that supporting foot. So I would actually go back and take a look at one of these frames. And for these, okay, so I can tell just visually, I can see that he is definitely within the frame of his body. So I'm gonna choose a different color of line here. And then I can just mark a line from his foot, and you can see that his head is definitely inside that frame. And then I can also do that on this side, and I can see that he's definitely inside of that. He's maybe a little bit over, but I would still mark that as normal. My tendency is that if I'm wavering between the two, then I would rather say that the person you know, doesn't have the gait deviation than to make it so that they do. So I would take this as a screenshot, and we can move on. Okay, so now we're looking at peak sagittal position. So our peak sagittal position, we're looking for close to upright throughout the gait cycle. You're going to score 1 if the line between the hip and shoulder is inclined forward by less than 10% or backwards, or score 2 if the line is inclined forwards by 10 degrees or more. So we're going to take a look at him from the side here. We'll just go back a couple of frames, make that big, and then just let you guys watch it one time. Okay, so he does have a little bit of lordosis here, but as far as his inclination of his trunk, I can do a line from his hip to his shoulders. And if I wanted to, I could actually measure that from a vertical. So if I measure that, oops, my measurement is outside of the, so that's showing me at 7 degrees. So our notes would say that if it is less than 10, then it would be a score of 1. If it's more than 10, it would be a score of 2. So anybody want to chime in and see what they think that we should be scoring this? A 0, 1, or a 2? Let you read those notes for a second. Okay. Well, I will say that I do think that he's about a 1. A lot of it's occurring in the lordosis, and but it is moderately forward. And we've got our measurement there that we can put into our screenshot. Okay, so now we're looking at peak hip extension and stance. So our explanatory notes say that we're going to judge this from the center line of the thigh segment. So we're looking to see how much his prosthetic thigh segment can go to full hip extension. So we're not trying to account for flexion of the residual limb in the socket. So you're trying to judge it with respect to the pelvis rather than vertical. So the normal hip extension is between 0 and 20 degrees. So we would score a 1 for flexion between 1 and 15, and for extension between 21 and 35. So again, outside of that 1 standard deviation, and score a 2 for any flexion that's greater than 15 degrees or extension that's beyond 35 degrees. So let's take a look at his gait again. All righty. All right, so let's go back and look for his peak hip extension. So again, I'll look at and use these little toggle tools to go frame to frame and sort of look for when he might start flexing that thigh. Still kind of extending, still extending. And now he's about to bend his knee. So I would take my angle from right around here. So it's tempting to use this vertical tool again, but because he does have a little bit of flexion, we want to account for that. So I will draw a line from his shoulder to his hip. Got the wrong tool. A line from his shoulder to his hip. And I'll actually extend that all the way down. And then I take an angle tool that is just a free form angle tool. And I will go from oops, don't have the right tool here. From his trunk. And when I get that, I don't like it. So I actually go back and do the other angle. So he's right around 14, 15 degrees there. So what do we say that we score that? So anything of extension between 21 and 35 would be greater or a score. So he is falling between 0 and 20 degrees, which would be considered normal. So we can go and score that. Okay. So hip flexion and swing. So we're looking for judging this from the center line of the thigh segment with respect to the pelvis rather than vertical again. So we'll look at that one as well. So both of the hip ones, again, it's taking into account that position of the pelvis. So not just from vertical, because you do have people with different positions. So very similar to what we just did, we're going to now look at the hip flexion. So seeing how much he can flex his hip. So we can actually just continue on with our frame by frame and look and see when we think that that thigh segment is no longer flexing, which he really, he's flexing, 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 flexing. And he's still flexing. There we go. I'll probably go right there before he puts his foot on the floor. So he's pretty actively kicking that foot out there. He doesn't have confidence in this knee anymore. It hasn't been functioning very consistently for him. He's pretty rough on it. So he says it's very intermittent when he feels the support. So that makes a lot of sense to me why he's kicking it so far out there. So I'll just take an angle, again, a freeform angle. So kind of in line with his trunk here, I'm going to measure his thigh angle, and then I'm going to, oops, something just happened. There we go. And then I'm lining this line up to his trunk. So I'm visually looking where his trunk is. And we've got about 40 degrees. So that would also be considered normal for him. So he's got good function. He's got the ability to put as much hip flexion into walking with his prosthesis. We just have some other areas that we could increase stability and make him feel a little bit better. So now we're looking at peak extension and stance. So as we go through the score, we started off with sort of the trunk, and then we went to the hip, and now we're going to the knee, and then you'll see that we'll go to the ankle. So there's a very, again, systematic approach. Now that we have finished the hip, we can move into the knee. So for those explanatory notes for knee extension and stance. So again, we're looking for any knee buckling. If a person is wearing a prosthesis is not safe, or is not, maybe they've developed a hip flexion contracture and now they are no longer able to completely extend that knee, then this would be where we would see some of that score for our transfemoral patients. And, you know, in our clinic, I decided to start with transfemoral patients as my first sort of cohort of wrapping our head around working video analysis into our practice, mostly because these are our patients that do have the most mobility risk and fall risk, and there's just usually a lot more going on. So we find more value in it with, again, how we're going to prepare for that intervention, but also how we're going to talk to the physician and the physical therapist about what's going on. So that's where we're, thanks, Jerry. That's where we're going to start. If you're looking for a patient population to start with, I would always pick one patient population. So if you're more of an orthotics practice, you might want to say that you're going to start with all of your stroke patients that are coming to your clinic, just because then you can really look at the data in a way that says, okay, we've actually been able to increase our patients, decrease our patients' gait scores by an average of this. And when you have one patient population you're working with, it's a lot easier to really look through that data. So sorry for that side note, but yes, I just wanted to add that in, that it's important to have a little bit of a plan when you start to get working with video. So peak extension and stance, so we're looking for that peak extension in terminal stance. So it's going to be between 0 and 15 degrees of flexion. And then we're going to score a 1 for flexion between 16 and 25. So if they have too much, or extension beyond that, so between 1 and 10 degrees of hyperextension. So again, those standard deviations are going to be on both sides of the spectrum of too much or too little. So then a score of 2 would be flexion greater than 25 or extension greater than 10. A score of 2 for transfemoral patients exhibits knee instability or buckling of the knee. So let's take a look and see what we see here. And we'll delete that image there. We could probably just watch him walk this way, since the prosthetic knee is on this side. All right, so I'll go back again and kind of go through that with frame by frame. So we're looking for our peak extension and terminal stance of that knee, and he's keeping that knee safe. He's not buckling or anything. So he's at a 0, I'm sure. Oops, wrong tool. Okay. Okay, so we have a great question as far as potential for measurement error due to key body segments obscured by clothing. How do you account for measurement error? Well, in my opinion, that if you're not using the tool, you don't have to use the tools. These scores are great to be used with video. You don't have to use any type of measurement tool. You're supposed to be able to make a clinical judgment based on what you see. I use the tools because I like numbers. So if I see that he does have any type of, let's say, knee flexion in stance when I'm expecting extension, if I can start with a number and then tweak his either alignment or intervene in a different way, then I have a goal to reduce that number. So for me, I use it as a more of a clinical tool. I don't use it as an absolute. So I do realize that, yes, I could put markers on here, but that's also really time consuming. And there's actually been some studies that have shown that we are reasonably reliable due to our clinical judgment to pick out those body segments. Now, you do have to be careful that you could be biased and say, well, I want to see an error here. I want to see I want to see a score of 2. So you have to just be very clear with yourself of how you're going to measure that. And it's best also to take your measurements as close to the middle of the screen as possible rather than over here, because your measurements would not be accurate over here versus in the middle of the screen. Again, I'm using the tools as a part to help me assist my clinical observations and my judgments, not as an absolute. So also, if I see a measurement that doesn't seem to make sense, I might actually measure a couple of times just to make sure that I didn't, put it off in a different area. But, I think that with our clinical skills of, using a goniometer and bisecting segments and locating joint centers, we're reasonably good at using these types of tools. All right, let's take an image of that and then we'll move on. Okay, so flexion in terminal stance and pre-swing. So now we are looking for the normal knee commences a steady rate of flexion of around opposite foot contact and reaches about 30 degrees of flexion by foot off. So we're going to draw an angle straight line through the femur and then measure the angle between this line and the tibia. So as you can see in this example here, actually, let me make this bigger for you guys. I didn't realize that I could have done that. So we're looking at our knee flexion here. So we want to extend the femur and then we're going to measure between the that line and the tibia. That's how we're going to use this angle. So we're going to score a 1 when flexion is initiated more than halfway through pre-swing, or score a 2 if initiation of flexion is around foot off or later. So we're just really looking for, is this person, dropping off, or do we see flexion in terminal stance? I have a feeling we're not going to with this patient, just because, well, maybe. So we don't want to have his foot off the floor yet. So I'll just go back to that frame here. Maybe even that frame, just because he's got a little bit more of his toe on the ground there. So the instruction said to take a line from the femur section down to the ground, and then we're going to measure between those two. If you have the ability, so lighting is also a big deal, to Dr. Havorka's point. As far as like measurement errors and body, like these darker colors. So if you have the ability to place a light, I probably could have put a small little LED light here that would really help me with this video. So that's another thing that you can do. Also asking patients, to not wear dark clothing, or making it so that if you have a dark background, that you don't have them wearing dark clothing as well. The worst is like if you have somebody with wearing black socks and you have like a black mat that they're walking over, that makes it very difficult to see when the foot actually leaves the floor versus when it's still on the floor. So those are tiny little things that you can do to, I'm just going to estimate this one here because I didn't measure. Actually, here, let's do this correctly. So we're going to take this through the, we want to go through the knee center as well. So here we go. Yep. And we'll measure from that to our tibial angle. So we've got 25 degrees there. So what do our notes say about 25 degrees? So we're looking for about 30 degrees of flexion by foot off. So I would say that he's got maybe a little bit of initiation that's a little bit late. Anybody agree or disagree? He's kind of waiting until he's just about to pick up that foot on the floor. So he's not going through any flexion there. He's starting a little bit there, and then he's really initiating just as he goes through swing. So I'll go back to my measurement here, take that screenshot, and I'll just say it's a little bit late, moderate late. Okay. So as you can see, when I'm explaining how I do this, I'm taking a lot longer than expected. So I want to make sure that we leave room for questions and answers. So I'm just going to go through a couple of additional explanations, and then we'll jump to questions if anybody has any, so that you guys are done by at least 10 a.m. Central Time. So now we're looking at peak knee flexion or heel rise in swing. So, you know, this is one that that we often see when people, if they come in with their components not necessarily tweaked or fine-tuned to where they should be. So we do want to see that initial swing flexion between 50 and 70 degrees. You know, textbooks is 60 degrees of heel rise and knee flexion. So we're going to score a marked for any flexion that's greater than that or less than 35 degrees, or score 1 for moderate. So between 71 and 85, too much flexion, and 35 and 49 is too little. So I don't know why, but this is one of my favorite ones. So we're looking at hip flexion or knee flexion in swing phase. And so he left the ground. He should be in his in early flexion, initial swing flexion, and he's not really bending the knee more than here. So we do have a little bit of blur going on because of that motion, but we can still definitely see that this is the knee and this is the foot. And so we'll do the same thing that we did before, where we go from that thigh segment through the knee to the floor, and then we'll measure that angle. And he's got about 51 degrees. So looks like he's just about normal. He's just over normal. So again, if you don't think that if you think that he is a little reduced in this area and we need to measure again, by all means, we can go back one frame and see, does that make a difference if we measure there? So let me see, I can remove these lines and draw another line. So that actually gives me a greater number, which makes me feel more confident that I'm not going to give him a reduced score. So I'll do that one because I don't believe he's going into any more flexion the next frame. So I could also. So this is just me, you know, fine tuning it, saying, okay, let's see if he actually does get any more knee flexion. which I don't think he's going to see. Now we are reduced, but he did get to 53. So now I feel confident that that 53 that I saw is pretty normal. Okay, so here we're looking for terminal swing at initial contact. We can go through that one. I just wanted to jump ahead since we are looking at a couple of, so then we go through the foot and the ankle. Let's see here. We're looking at swing phase whips, circumduction and swing. So he probably has more of these than some of those other. So let's go over step symmetry, because this is also one of my favorite ones. Just because I get to use some of the measurement tools, and I like to use the measurement tools. So let's go back and see how we might measure step length. So this is also another tool that I use to talk with my patients about what I'm seeing with their gait. So obviously you can talk with them about any lateral leaning that you see, and you can practice some strengthening, and you can go through, you know, what you're seeing. It's nice to show them, okay, here's your lateral trunk lean, sort of show them where that line is, so that then maybe they could practice a little bit and then take another video and see if they've improved. Those are really great things to do to help them visualize it. But when I've got step asymmetry, I like to show them a measurement, and then we start to work on that from there. So I'm going to use this dot tool here first to just mark my heel contact of each side. Oops. I think I did 2 on that one. There we go. And then we'll mark our second one as well. So now I do need to calibrate the measurement tool, but I know that he has a size 27 foot. So I'm going to put my calibration tool on his foot, and I say that's 27 centimeters. And now I can use my measurement tools, and I like to use this one because then I can pull. It's only going to take the vertical distance, no horizontal. So if I use something like this, there might be horizontal components to that. So here I'm actually just taking the horizontal, or the vertical, sorry, the horizontal components. So this is a screenshot that I'll show him to say, okay, you're taking a really long prosthetic side step, and then you're taking a very short sound side step. And that's usually because he doesn't feel safe or confident in his prosthesis. And also he definitely doesn't feel confident in the socket. He feels like he's going to fall out. So he doesn't have any stabilization at the hip. So he's trying to get off of it as quickly as possible. And that's stuff that I can put into these notes as well, so that I can send over to the doctor. So for our explanatory notes for step asymmetry, let's just quickly go through to make sure that, oops, I think I passed it. Here we go. Okay, so there's a little bit of math involved with this one. You're going to score 1 if there is a moderate difference between sides in either the timing or the length of the steps, such that the longer step or swing time is up to 25% longer than the other side. Now we can also time how much time he's spending on each of the feet, by the way. So we could also use that as our measurement tool. I do like to do the percentages of the lengths though, because it's a nice tool to help show him. So I would only score him as moderately asymmetrical. It's definitely not marked. And then I could definitely do that math if anybody wants to do it that's in the audience, and tell me if I'm below or above 25%. But the other way that I could have done this is I could just use a stopwatch. So if I wanted to just get rid of all of these, let's just see here. We could go to the frame when he lands on the ground, and we can start a stopwatch for that section. And we can just, we don't even have to, play the video. We can just look at his, single stance time on his prosthetic side was 55 seconds. And then we'll start that over and look at, that wasn't all single stance, by the way, sorry about that. Stance time, something's happening with my tools. Every time somebody comes into the room, my tools get taken away from me. Okay, so we'll just look at stance time of the contralateral side. And so we had 55 seconds. And now we're going to look at stance time of his sound side was 96 seconds. So it is almost double, not quite, maybe 80% more time on the contralateral side than on the prosthetic side. So that's a pretty interesting piece of information. It's not 55 seconds, I know it's 0.55. And then 0.96. So those are also things that we can use to formulate goals with the patient. So how are we going to work with the patient to say, and the physical therapist to say, let's try to get these times a little bit more even. So I've definitely gone a little bit over. So I know that Elizabeth said that you guys are all staying in this room. I did not complete the report, but if you do go to this resources in the Google Drive, which I will make sure here, I'll just share this link with everybody in the chat so that you can see this folder here. So this folder has my presentation in it, the tutorials, the explanatory notes for the POGs, but you can also look at the, you can go and find the explanatory notes for the Edinburgh. I can put those in there as well. Oh, so this one is actually my completed report, by the way. So you can see that his end score that I had decided was 8 out of 32. So you can sort of go through this and take a look at some of the images that I put in. So this patient is in a work in progress right now. So I'm hoping at some point that I can show, after our intervention, that we've been able to decrease that score, hopefully to at least a 5 out of 32 is sort of our goal. So I will open it up for questions. I've gone